Hey, welcome everyone to another special episode of the Your Morning Coffee podcast. It's a conversation with Jeffrey Smith. He's the Vice President of Marketing for Alliance Entertainment. If you're listening to a vinyl LP today, chances are it actually came through Alliance.
Jeffrey and I sit down to talk about releases on physical products like CDs and vinyl, Alliance versus Amped, and the truth about vinyl buyers who actually own a record player. So now, without further ado, here's Jeffrey Smith from Alliance Entertainment. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air, on the air, on the air, on the air. Standing by. Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Jeffrey, good to see you. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Jay. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Let's dive right in. For those with no prior knowledge, talk a little bit about your role at Alliance and also sort of the differences between Alliance Entertainment and Amped distribution.
Yeah, for sure. I came to Alliance at the beginning of the year. I came from Discogs, where I was VP of marketing quite a while there. It's been a total of 9 years at Discogs, and came over to Alliance to help launch Alliance Authentic, which is a new brand under Alliance Entertainment. Alliance Entertainment is our parent company, and we're publicly traded on the NASDAQ. Did over $1 billion in annual revenue last year, largest physical music and media distributor in the world. So it's vinyl, DVDs, Blu-rays, CDs, all of that. And really largely getting into collectibles as a new revenue path as well. So there's quite a few brands that kind of lean in on the collectible side. Amped, different, but owned by Alliance Entertainment, right? So they're an exclusive music distributor arm of Alliance. And so exclusive distribution of over 110 different labels. We're talking about Sub Pop, Epitaph, Secretly, Virgin Music Group. I could go on and on there. It's more sells to the more, brick and click retailers than any other music distributor out there, right? So we're consistently charting like top 10 country albums, top 10 R&B albums. It's across the board there. So it's an incredibly diverse ecosystem. Key stat for you in that is Alliance Entertainment distributed 16.3 million vinyl units. That's a trailing 12-month trend for us that ended in 2025, end of 2025. I think that's correct. And represents about 33% of the total revenue of Alliance Entertainment. Huge for us, but also shows the diversity of Alliance Entertainment as a whole. And I could go into customers. It's like we serve Walmart, Target, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Best Buy, Sam's, just all of it, right? So, and it's like a little, I personally, and not speaking for the company here, I've always from the outside until I came to the company, it was very much like I was aware of Alliance Entertainment. And now that I'm inside of it, I'm like, it is much, much, much bigger than I expected, while also remaining like pretty low profile even within the music industry itself. And so that's always kind of surprising.
I want to talk about Alliance Authentic, but before we do, let's take a step back because you came over from Discogs, which is one of my favorite sites ever. It's just for those who collect music or interested in music, it is a rabbit hole that you can fall into and spend hours and hours. And talk a little bit about Discogs with those who don't know about Discogs, because that too is a beast.
Discogs is yet another kind of under the radar platform, right? So it's kind of a, if you know, you know, place to hang out. Massive global reach, largest, absolutely the largest secondhand or peer to peer marketplace there is in the world. What's surprising there is just the overall reach within the collecting community, the size of it. I believe they ended last year with around 15 million uh, records sold through their marketplace. I know that they surpassed 113 million items in collection across the year. So imagine just the sheer volume of that in the kind of the ecosystem of vinyl and collecting, where that many records or that many items have been added to collection by their users. It just shows you like kind of the reach within the community. But man, if there's something that you can't find in the world at your record store or on other online like Amazon or even eBay, you will absolutely be able to find someone that has a copy of that record that you've been looking for, uh, pretty much no matter what it is. I also know that they've sold some they've had some recent sales I've seen where, you know, you're talking about records going for 15, $20,000. I think there was a cassette that went for over $10,000. So just, you know, speaking to the collectability of things and people being out there on the hunt for things, it's still incredible that you know, the price at which things go to for some of these items, and also just the rarity of it and how that fetches that price. It's crazy. But Discogs is absolutely the only place to go to if you're a record collector of any level, beginning to, you know, having a half million records in your house or in your collection or whatever that looks like. I know there is one person that has over 500,000 items in their collection on Discogs. You know, it's the whole spectrum of all that. So it's really incredible, and I really value my time there. I spent 9 years there and love the people there still, and deeply miss that environment. But I'm also excited at what I'm doing today too.
Yeah, I love Discogs. I found so many rare records, but it's also, you can sort of look and see what the value is of certain things, and it just gives you a nice indicator. I've spent many, many hours on Discogs. Well, let's dive into some of the things that are happening today. So, for the third year in a row, vinyl has outsold CDs. From your vantage point, you know, you work with basically every plant in North America, and you run one yourself. How has the industry sort of caught up to demand for vinyl? Because there was a time a few years ago where there wasn't much capacity left. What's that look like today?
You know, I feel like things have normalized at this point. I'm not really hearing that there's the issue of, you know, vinyl arriving on time from plants, there being kind of a backlog there logistically. Everything seems to be rolling quite on time. You know, I know a couple of years ago there were a lot of stores around, like even RSD, going, titles aren't making it in time because of logistics, because of that backlog there. And seemingly this year, you know, just kind of coming out of that weekend, everyone just had an amazing time. I know that Alliance Entertainment, our role in that as far as distributor, you know, I kept seeing people just, you know, thanking us for getting everything to them in plenty of time for their customers, you know, on Saturday. So, you know, largely, I think that time that was fueled by pandemic and just, you know, everyone was having issues with logistics at the time. That is all kind of level set. There's plenty of capacity. You know, we've also had a lot of pressing plants come online over the last few years. So there's that, which is a sign that, you know, that it's still booming, right? It's still growing, right?
Today, a new album on vinyl routinely retails for $35, $45. Some of the color variants could be $50 to $60. How do you think about pricing when demand still feels, elastic versus the risk of pricing out younger buyers who sort of reignited this whole vinyl revival?
When I was at Discogs last year, we really dug into pricing, and let's, just be honest, it's undoubtedly challenging for some buyers in the space, which is why some people end up going to Discogs, going to eBay, going to these secondhand markets to get used vinyl, because as a whole, you're looking at, 25 to 30% less expensive than a retail copy. At the same time, last year I spent some time in Mexico City, and stores like La Roma, for example, there, records are retailing for 60, 65, $70 US, right? So we're still in a space where, are we getting up to a retail price that is challenging for some? Sure. The cost of everything right now is absolutely going up. I do think the environment that we're in today, materials are going to rise, so we'll see how that affects retail prices as well. But the great thing about it, and largely, I think, kind of a dark part of this is, as far as we don't know what we don't know, is the size of that secondary market. Everything I know points that the secondary market could be as large as what we know of the retail market. We've got those RIA numbers that just came out, that it's $1 billion industry in the US. We largely don't know what the secondary market looks like. I know from my time at Discogs, can't share revenue numbers there because I'm in the dark to it now. But knowing that it's a pretty massive part, knowing what I hear from record stores, that they're selling as much on eBay or more on eBay than they're selling on Discogs, could be pretty sizable. That's why I'm always like, yes, prices are hyper focused on some. I think the variant issues are starting to kind of level out, where you're not seeing that big price difference between a standard and a color variant, things like that. It's more in the deluxe packaging, those kind of things. But the ecosystem and all the commerce going around is incredibly strong. And I don't, it's definitely not going away, but I don't see anything kind of pulling growth away from it just because of people's connection to music and everything that's going on culturally.
I hope we get to a point where we're tracking used vinyl. I know there are people working hard on that. There's a well-cited stat that a significant share of vinyl buyers don't actually own a turntable. But if you look at the Luminate report, that's true with millennials, but if you're Gen X or baby boomers, most of those people that buy vinyl own a turntable. But regardless, what does that tell you about what people are actually purchasing vinyl? And do you think that it's become, more of a collectible? And we can talk a little bit about Alliance Authentic now too. Is it becoming more of a collectible and a merch item, or is it like, what's the balance between that in your mind and just a playback format?
I think there's some pretty solid numbers on that, where it's like boomers, absolutely. I think it's something like 89 to 90% of them own a turntable and own records. The Gen Z number, I believe, is around 60%. You're right. The millennials are the wonky number in there, where it might be a little over half. Vinyl Alliance's Gen Z report that they put out last year showed that in their polls was around 80% of Gen Z were vinyl fans and own a record player too. So, and I believe it's 76% of them buy records at least once a month. They've done some pretty exhaustive reporting on that, and I rely on that a lot. That's why I kind of pull these numbers around that. And look, another kind of barometer here for me is turntable sales are still growing year over year, right? So I've got friends with Audio Technica and some other companies, and I'm always asking them, what the market is bearing out. So, if turntable sales are still growing, vinyl sales are still growing, it just speaks to, overall growth and culturally what's going on. Now, the collectible side of it, it's really interesting since taking on the role here at Alliance Authentic and really leaning into that collectability side.
Well, for those that don't know, Jeffrey, talk about what that is.
Yeah, so Alliance Authentic, what we're doing here is we're preserving vinyl releases that are certified uncirculated collectibles. So each preserved record is curated, it's individually numbered. We're preserving it in its original manufactured state, which means it's never going to retail. It's never, essentially, it's never touched, right? So records move directly from the manufactured state into Alliance Authentic's preservation process. The retail sourcing position allows us to kind of move that from distribution into that encapsulated collectible state. Now, if you're familiar with baseball cards or Pokemon cards or comic books and how and even AMG, which is a vinyl grading service, has kind of come online over the last few years. It's treating vinyl records as a collectible first, and it's definitely not for everyone, right? But at the same time, we are, as humans, kind of collectors of things by nature, right? And you can even tell by your background, the records I have in my background, we all have that innately in us. And what I started seeing in my work at Discogs, especially around Gen Z and some younger millennials, is that, look at all the Instagram posts you see with like vinyl walls, where, it's like everybody's kind of showing who it is that they are through the records that they're sharing to the world. It's an extension of all that, right? So the records that mean the most to you, that speak to your identity, you treat them differently than like the dollar bin records that you're going to grab that you might play every now and then, or maybe that you've never played and you've just kind of put them in the stack and never touched them again. That thing is what Alliance Authentic is built for. It's that preservation model, preserving music history, treating these records differently. The idea that you can buy the new Harry Styles record and it go untouched, and in 50 years, what that might be, not only worth financially, but worth to you as a fan, right? And showing that's who you are. It's like, I always tell people, it's like if I had a chance to go back and own Nirvana's Nevermind from 1991 and it was an original pressing, one, it'd be worth a lot of money, but it would be so cool to have that thing kind of locked away and kind of in a time capsule to where, even pulling it out and showing it to friends can mean something a little differently than if I've got my reissue that I play that sounds awesome, but it's not that, it's not that first pressing, right? Or it's not that thing. So that's really kind of the concept here, and that, these things come in premium packaging. It comes in a presentation box. When you receive it as a customer, this thing is like triple box, so it's like heavy as hell. And we take really great care of that through like the logistics chain, where it's just like it's this substantial piece of art, really, when it comes down to it. So for those that are collecting in that way, and they may or may not have a turntable, they may or may not have every variant of this record as well, so it's really for that audience, right? And it's, and Jay, it may not be for you in a sense though, but what you have behind you, even, with the Nirvana, with the Lights Out and the Johnny Cash, it's like, that's not really treating it any differently than what we're doing with Alliance Authentic, right?
I mean, I have the Beatles Butcher cover in front of me, and these are collectible things, and I can't wait to see on Discogs where they'll probably have a separate section for all of these.
Well, that's funny. I do check the forum still. It's just like, I love the drama that goes on in the Discogs forum. And the cool thing about this is at some point, I do think these will be listed there. but you're looking at it's still the variant that you're selling, or sorry, not the variant, but like that particular release variant, right? So if you've got an original pressing, you've mastered UPC, right? So that original pressing, the encapsulation is really kind of a collectible tier packaging for that record. So you might see this, an encapsulated record for sale right next to one that hasn't been. So it won't be treated as a variant in Discogs. So until Discogs can get kind of marketplace listing images, right, of the record, which is they've needed to have done forever, so that you can actually see the record that you're buying and not just like whatever's loaded up to the database. But until that happens, I think it's going to be challenging for people to sell them there, which is why we have our peer-to-peer marketplace on Alliance Authentic too, because the NFC technology, which we can talk about, allows the ownership to kind of follow through each sale. So, let's say that you buy a copy at $180, which is our base price, and it sells out and someone else wants to buy it from you and they make an offer on it. It's $250 or whatever, changes hands, but also you can document that ownership is documented along the way. So 50 years from now, you might see that your record changed down 20 times. Here's the value of it today, but you can go back through time and see, who's owned it, what it's sold for, all of that. And it's something incredibly unique that we bring to the table on that side too.
CDs have shown a surprising uptick, and a lot of that's driven by K-pop, some of that packaging, some collector-oriented releases. Do you think this is a real second life for the format, or something that shouldn't be thought of as a trend?
Oh, I absolutely think CDs are on the come up for sure. We're seeing increase in sales across the board. Used CDs, I know in the record stores that I visit and the conversations having at Discogs, we're seeing an increase year over year, and that's been happening over the last few years. I think if you go look at the IFPI data, the RIAA data, it's all showing that those things are that format is increasing, and you got to look at it. It's a lower price point now for sure. On the used market, it's incredibly cheap to buy used CDs. And so, what we're seeing at Alliance is that increase as well, right? So I don't know, and I wouldn't want to project that it's going to follow the same trend line that vinyl has. I still think vinyl is kind of in a world all of its own and is taking on just such a heavy, important cultural piece for almost like kind of the anti-streaming flag that we're flying. But CDs are still seeing double-digit gains year over year. So I wouldn't discount it at all. I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see it. I know that I've seen younger collectors getting way into it because, look, it's novelty for them too. Like, they didn't grow up with CD as a format. And if they did, they were so small they don't remember. But it's like CD players aren't in cars anymore. It's like you've still got that hunt for, like, the thing that plays the thing still that happens. So and it's like anything, man. It's like I constantly say that none of this behavior is any different than when I was in high school or you were in high school, or it's the same thing. It's like finding that cool niche thing that's your own, that you want to show how cool you are to your friends. That's what CDs are today. That's what the kit album is for even a younger demographic, the tiny vinyls. But it was what that stuff was. I remember carrying a boombox going, it was massive, like just walking this thing around to show not only people who I am, but what I'm listening to and all that stuff. It's like the boombox is starting to come back around. So it's just like all that stuff is cyclical. And if we just pay attention to what's happened, in the past, it's all going to move itself around. But, and it all goes back to that collecting and music as identity.
Yeah. And I've been reading a lot about, young people getting into film cameras and developing film in a dark room and buying CDs and buying physical books. And I feel like you mentioned something about streaming. I think that's totally true. I think there's almost like a minor backlash where people want something tactile. They want something, they want to own something. And it's a whole different experience, as you know, putting vinyl on a turntable and you're listening to that 20 minutes or so. You have to be present and you can't go do something else because it's going to end and you're going to have to flip it. And I feel like younger people especially are either discovering or rediscovering the joy of having something physical.
Every time I start feeling like the next generation is going to lose it and like we're all going to fall apart as a culture, and like it's just, Gen X was like the coolest generation or whatever the thing is. It's like something happens within a younger generation where you're like, there's hope. And you're absolutely right. All of this stuff is being done with its intention. My wife is a little younger than me, and she hangs out with friends because of her work that are younger than her. And so I have access to 20 somethings and early 30s, and just like a lot of people in that generation, just within my own friend groups and things like that. And I see this intention of like, this phone has really messed us up for a while, and let's like figure out something else to do. Like I'm in this text group with a bunch of people that's just a board game text group where they're all like, let's pick a board game and we're going to all sit down in a room, leave our phones, play. I think the only one that's not on the list is Monopoly. Everyone hates Monopoly. But the idea there is that we want to have these face-to-face conversations, these interactions, and that is spreading. It's like, but it's different. It's like this generation that again is coming up is like, instead of going out till 2 in the morning, they're having day parties at coffee houses with DJs. Like that, it's like their own twist on what's coming around. And I find that stuff so interesting because it's the same behavior, but it's just coming out in all these different ways. But I do think it's like, the recent lawsuit with Meta, and coming around to like, yes, the algorithms are endangering our, the kids. It's like that stuff's going to change. I do think that we're probably not going to have access to social media until you're like 18, which is awesome. And that's going to continue to change behavior. And man, it's like listening to records, it's somewhat of an act of rebellion too. It's like you have to make a choice, you have to bring intention to it. You have to set aside that time because you do need to flip the record and be actively listening. And I think there's not a whole lot of that in the world today where everything is just like hitting you and it's all passive and coming from everywhere. I think more and more people are going to lean back into that, is what I'm seeing.
I agree. I interviewed the Black Keys for the podcast, and they do this cool thing where they go and they take over a local bar, and everybody brings their 45s, but they can't be hits, right? And a lot of times they play the B-sides, but they all get together in this social setting, and they play these songs. And think about playing a 45, man, you really have to be present because you've got 2 minutes 50 or whatever it is. And but then you can have that conversation. And one of the things that you touched on is you're not isolated. It's a social thing, because growing up, I used to share my records, that experience with my friends. We would sit around and listen to records, and it was a social thing. I worked at Tower Records and people would come in, and I feel like that's coming back.
Absolutely. I think the epidemic of loneliness and isolation, we're right in the middle of it. And there's plenty of people talking about it. I follow Scott Galloway, and I think he kind of hits all of that on the head, where it's like, he leans into younger men, but it's absolutely just younger people are starting to go, looking at the amount of friends that they have or the amount of close relationships they have and really assessing going, I don't have that. And in the hunt for those things, I think all music is the greatest connector of all time. It really is something that no matter who you are, what you believe, what side of the red or blue line you're on, and all that stuff, it's like if you like Springsteen or you like Olivia Rodrigo or you like whatever artist, right? You can have a conversation about it and you can connect with someone, and it does not matter who they are, and it's beautiful and amazing. And so when you look at the power of that connection, it's like, man, if you're alone or isolated, it allows you to enter into a conversation with someone. You it's just like it's incredible how slippery that slope can be for those people that are by themselves, It's like, yeah, it's like getting a little weepy talking about it, but it's like, man, that shit is so important. I was just watching that Noah Khan documentary that's on Netflix. I know very little about him and his music. I think I kind of might have stayed away from it because it felt a little stompy folk music to me at the beginning. But you see that guy go through a lot of this stuff too, and how his fan base connects over this stuff, over his music and his story. It's like, again, all these different types of people kind of coming together and like having this shared story. It's like, man, that it's amazing and it's incredible and could be the thing that kind of pulls us out of a lot of this isolation, a lot of this to be blunt, a lot of the shit that we're in right now.
Well said. So as we sort of wind down, I want you to get out your crystal ball and look at the
Yeah.
next 10 years. Vinyl's been growing for 19 years straight. What do you think about that? Do you think it's going to plateau as we go forward? Is it going to keep growing? What say you?
I think I'm pretty bullish around growth because there is enough people in the industry that are listening, that are seeing what's happening within collecting and how people are buying, and they're really leaning into, all right, we've done the color variant thing and we've done the reissue thing. And now it's time to, what's all the other value that we can add to this? Really leaning into storytelling through the packaging. I was talking to a manager that, well, like the Noah Khan release that's coming, how they're putting story to the color variants that are there, and there's a reason behind it. And that engages with the fan because that means something. Again, not to bring up Taylor Swift, but she really is on top of the mountain with this stuff going, every one of these things has to be intentional. It has to tell part of the story why this thing exists. And as that creeps into everything else, I think what vinyl is going to represent here is it's a part of the story. It's just not a format anymore. Like, I'm not making a choice between I want the record or I'm just going to stream it or I'm going to get this or this. It's like, if I don't get that record, I'm going to miss part of the story of this, of the thing that I love. Then you look at what's happening around like Anjani and Portine, the math, right? It's like that couldn't be such an adverse reaction to everything else that's going in the world. But it's like you look what everyone went to when that starts getting more viral. It's like they could not keep their record in stock, and then it's reselling for $300 and $400 on Discogs. Luckily, they did this ATO deal, and now like everybody. But trust me when I say, I bet that record charts from a band that had 30 people seeing them in Canada 6 months ago. Like they're still doing their little, 200, 300 cap room tour, and the tickets are reselling for $800, $900, right? Overall, if that type of thing keeps happening and people are just out there craving that connection and following that kind of innate piece of who we are, it'll absolutely grow. It'll keep growing. I'm bullish on. I don't think it's going away. It never really went away, but it's not going to like have that dip again, unless just something new comes around that just disrupts the entire music ecosystem, which that could happen as well. I mean, that's what happened with CDs. So, but yeah, man, I have full. I hope so, because I've invested my entire career in this thing, and a lot of us have, and everything that I see is just like it's all just kind of up and to the right, green lights ahead, and that feels
Yeah, it sure feels like it.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, Jeffrey, where can people learn more about you and what you're up to?
Allianceauthentic.com. That's the that's what we've launched last 2 weeks ago. Getting into that collectible category around vinyl. I think it's important. I think it's brand new for the industry, so we're really anxious to get feedback on that and get records in people's hands. I'm always on LinkedIn. That's my preferred choice of place to have a conversation at, just because I'm trying to stay off the other socials. And I'm always excited to talk about things like this. I'm honestly super passionate about it and the way people collect and what they're listening to and all that. So I'm just thank you, Jay, for the time and space today.
Always a pleasure chatting with you. We'll talk again soon.
All right, sounds good.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.